to everybody here. I've got to say, Professor John Hattie is one of my heroes and one of my mentors. He has been working in the education industry for over 25 years, researching on visible learning. If you know nothing about visible learning, don't worry, John will enlighten you as well at the same time. Now, it is very sad that John could not actually attend face-to-face, because actually he's now in America at the moment, and he's currently normally based in Australia. So it is actually wonderful that we've actually managed to get John, hopefully online, or you have to listen to me for 40 minutes, to actually talk about a very interesting topic at the end of the day. So what I would say, because I know many of you here from TNS, but also from head office, and I would like to hope that I can now hand over to John. John, are you with us?
Salam. It is wonderful to have the opportunity to talk to you and the Beaconsfield team there in Pakistan. I always like to start with grounding this notion, in our case today on collective efficacy, into the research. And where I want to start is, some of you will be aware that I published a book in 2008 on visible learning. 14 years later, next March, I'm releasing a sequel to visible learning, updating it, moving it from 150 to 350 influencers, raising the sample size to 400 million, and trying to put the story a lot more up front. Certainly in the last 14 years, there has been a major increase in the number of meta-analyses from 800 to 2100. But the distribution of effects hasn't much changed. Now, just to be clear, the notion of a meta-analysis, someone goes out there and does a study and they write up their article. Someone else comes along and does the same topic, let's say reciprocal teaching, and they publish their article. And more people publish their articles on reciprocal teaching. And then along comes a meta-analysis person, and they ask two major questions. Firstly, taking all those other studies out there, what's the average size of the impact? And you can see it's on a scale from around about -0.8 to 1.9. And then they ask a second question, which is often forgotten. Does that size of that effect change in Pakistan compared to Melbourne, Australia, for 5-year-olds and 15-year-olds, for special needs and for gifted kids? And those moderators are pretty important in our equation. But you can see across the 400 million students that almost everything we do to a student increases their achievement. Anything above 0 indicates that achievement is increased. So asking teachers and policy people what works is the wrong question completely. We surely need to ask what works best. And my interest is, what's the common understanding of those influences in the red zone compared to those in the yellow zone? Now you can see there's a lot of effects in the red zone. There's not many in the blue zone. That is the negative effects. And most of those negative effects make perfect sense, such as the effect size of bullying, -0.3. But the largest negative effect size of all is when we label students, -0.6, -0.7. Take two students of the same personality, the same behavior, the same achievement, and you label them. ADHD, autism, all the labels. And suddenly you have a -0.6 effect. Primarily because so often when we label students, we explain why they can't, and they believe they can't. And I want to come back to that. But the overall message is that 0.4 on this magnitude, how big the effect is about average. And you can see there's a lot of effects greater than the average. And that is my fascination, particularly compared to what effects there are in the yellow zone. I'm not today going to talk about all the effects. I do give you, however, a free website called MetaX, and it has all the data about the student, the home, the school, etc. Has definitions of all the terms, has a frequently asked questions, and much more. So if you want the detail today beyond collective efficacy, that's the place to go. I'm also introducing the thermometer. And you can see here for collective efficacy, it's very, very high. It's really hot, 1.36. And you can see also that R there, that robustness index of 2. And it's a maximum of 5. 2 out of 5 means it's okay, but there's not many studies. There's only 3 meta-analyses, only 85 studies. Not a lot. Now, the reason I still want to emphasize collective efficacy is because it comes with a whole lot of other high-impact strategies that bring that robustness much, much higher. And when I look at the 7 big ideas underlying the whole visible learning model, you can see the first one. And look down them all. I just find it fascinating that the top 7 influences don't include a student, don't include a curriculum, don't include an age, don't include prior achievement, special needs to gifted, don't include most countries. And that first one, teachers working together, evaluating their impact. Now, a lot's going to determine what we mean by evaluate and impact, and I'll come back to that. But just think of that. Teachers working together, evaluating your impact, has the largest effect size on the students of the lot, and they're not even in the room. And that's why collective efficacy about impact is going to be so important. And one of the key factors in that are your expectations. Those teachers who have high expectations tend to have it for all the students and are successful. And those teachers with low expectations tend to have it for all the students, and sadly, they're also successful in the wrong way. Those teachers and leaders who explain away, they can't do it because you sent me the wrong children. You should understand the socioeconomic status. You should understand the curriculum we've got. You should understand our assessment. You should understand the quality of our leaders. You should understand the quality of our parents. You should look at our facilities. That mindset is debilitating and massively negative on the impact of your students. How you can then take those high expectations, which I trust you all have, and convert that so that students are aware through you being explicit about what the success of the lesson is, the success criteria. Like when knowing and good diagnosis about where students are, and then setting the success criteria for the lesson or series of lessons, that's using the Goldilocks principle, not too hard, not too easy, and not too boring. And then the purpose of teaching, the purpose of assessment, the purpose of feedback is to help the child move from there to meet that success and continue to raise it. Students up to about the age of 8 are reasonably compliant. After that, they want to be challenged. And quite frankly, one of our problems in many of our schools is the work is too easy, not that it's too challenging. Now, if there is a gap between where the students are and where they need to be, then there's a whole lot of non-knowing, errors, mistakes, misunderstandings in there. And one of the key factors is making sure that students realize that making an error is an opportunity to learn, not a source of embarrassment. Your students do not come to your schools in Pakistan to learn that which they already know. It's what they don't know. And if I came into your classes and asked your students, what do you do when you don't know what to do? What do you do when you make a mistake? If they're like most students in the world, they all say the same thing. I ask the teacher. Watch them. They don't. The students who ask the teacher know the answer or think they know the answer. Those who, by age 8, who don't know the answer, they have learned. to withdraw, to not be seen, to avoid, or even disrupt. So how do we make errors welcome and a learner's best friend? And how do we then, as teachers, maximize that feedback to us about what's happening in the students' minds, how they're going about solving problems, how they're dealing with error and mistakes? And then that relentless focus on learning. I argue that we spend far too much on teaching and not enough time on learning. And we need to get that balance right. And I could spend a whole nother session on that. But these are the big ideas. And when you look down that list, I'm sure you'll start to see why that collective responsibility, those collective high expectations, that collective evaluation, that collective sense of what challenges is absolutely key to successful schools, classes, and students' experiences. So what is collective efficacy? It's the belief across all the adults, teachers, leaders, anyone adult in the school, about their ability to promote student outcomes. And you can see it's a way of thinking. And a lot of my work says it's not so much what you do that matters, it's how you think about what you do that matters. So more thinking, please, in the staff room, more thinking aloud in professional development. And the power of the collective is the critique of that, the evaluation of that. So staff rooms have to be safe places for teachers to talk about what they don't know, for teachers to make mistakes, to teachers to be critiqued and said, hey, here's how we can raise the standards and the expectations. And school leaders, you're going to see you have a very critical role here. I'm going to argue there are a series of steps to understand this thing called collective efficacy, starting with this notion of what is efficacy? It is a kind of simple notion. It means having the confidence that you could take on the challenge of educating this student or this class of students. Let me give you an example. A few years ago, I had reason to ask, what was the literacy and numeracy rate across the world in 1900? And it was 14%. And in the year 2000, it was 86% literate, 14% not literate. If we were writing the history of the 20th century, surely that must be the most remarkable improvement in 100 years. Now, I know in that 14% not literate in 2000, that's a lot of students. But let's pause. 14 to 86% across the world. And my question to you is why? Why did we go from 14 to 86% in 100 years on literacy and numeracy? Now, if I was physically with you, I could walk around the room and we could get some answers. And having done this many times, I get answers like, well, our communication's improved, our technology's improved, our textbooks are improved, my access to schools improved. And I would argue that all those reasons are not the right answer. There is but and only one answer, one reason why we have gone in this world in 100 years from 14 to 86% literate. You. And this is probably the hardest thing that we do when we work with schools, get teachers to take attribution for their success. I know if I put up a case where we had a failing student or a failing situation, it's easy to blame the teacher. But when we have so much success, and that is a dramatic success, we've got to put the credit where it's due. It is how we thought. It is how we made decisions that made the difference. That confidence that we could go in there and improve the literacy and numeracy rates of the world from 14 to 86%. That's what efficacy means, the confidence to make a difference. I look at COVID and I look what's happened over the last 2 years, your country and mine. I live in Melbourne, Australia. We have the unenviable record of having the longest lockdown of any city in the world, 400 days of it. And there's already 3 meta-analyses on the effects of COVID. And you can see there that the effect sizes are not as dramatic as many people argue. Like minus 0.14 is about the same achievement students lose over the summer holidays. And given the death, the unemployment, the equity, the resources, the workload, the trauma, you've got to stop and pause and say, what caused the achievement to be so minor on average? Yeah, big differences, big variations, but on average, it was so minor. And again, the answer is simple. Learning didn't stop. No such thing as learning lost. Learning continued. And you've got to give incredible credit to the educators for coming up with innovative ways to keep learning going under very traumatic situations. And I think we should pause and thank teachers for what happened in that 2 years. It could have been a million times worse. It was not. It was quite minor overall. When I work with schools to ask what worked during COVID, what did you do different? Now, one of the things they did different is they had to stop talking. They can't talk the whole time when students are on the internet. They moved more to triage like nurses do, where they had to prioritize. They had to teach students how to work by themselves, how to work in teams, how to become their own teachers. They had to have a lot more scaffolding of the progression and teach students to be more evaluative of their own learning. We introduced a new concept besides effectiveness. Some students were incredibly efficient. They could do a whole day's work at home in 2 hours. And many of them said to me, what do I do for 5 hours at school, or whatever number of hours I spent at school? And we also found on social media that a lot of students were more willing to talk about what they didn't know, that they're not prepared to do if you're standing right beside them. Now, I'm not suggesting we should go to distance learning. That's not the answer. It was a negative effect. But I am saying that we can learn a lot from COVID to bring back to our regular school. And this powerful role of our expectations, our confidence that we can actually make not only a difference, but a large difference. And when I look at the research, you can see that the effect size of expectations, teachers who have low expectations, who tend to have it for all the students, 0.06. High expectations, dramatically higher. Parents, it's the biggest effect that parents have on their students, far above socioeconomic status, are their expectations. And we should never forget, when a student walks into your class, they have very clear expectations about whether they're going to learn from you, whether they're going to make a difference, whether they're going to get an A or a B or a C. And if you don't understand their expectations, you don't understand the student. School leaders, if you don't understand your teachers' expectations, you're probably wasting your time bringing any kind of innovation in your school. If your teachers have low expectations, who want to blame everything on someone other, no innovation is going to make a difference, because they're still going to think that way. And trying to articulate in the staff room, in the conversations with teachers about their expectations for each and every student is the key part of what we're looking for when we talk about collective efficacy. My colleague Christine Ruby-Davies has gone and found samples of low expectation teachers and high expectation teachers, and you can see the effect sizes. And I'll give you a moment to look at the differences she observed in classrooms. And the point I want to make is what dramatic differences those expectations have to what a classroom looks like and feels like. Huge differences across those classrooms. Understanding how your teachers think and how your school leaders think about their expectations is critical to collective efficacy. We've spent a lot of time in our work looking at student efficacy and expectations. And we've developed this notion of the assessment capable learner. And these are the 5 questions that we want the students to ask, and we have to teach them how to ask them and how to answer them. Now, we've got fancy words for these, self-regulation, metacognition, all this stuff. But we like to think of it more of this is what a really capable learner is able to do. And what I find interesting is that when you work with 4 and 5-year-olds, they can do this. But by age 8, most of them have learned that their job is to come to class, sit up straight, and watch the teacher work. No. We want to also understand the student expectations and teach them how to maximize those expectations. This notion of evaluative thinking, and you heard that argument, how do we evaluate our impact? Now, one of our persistent findings is that it's how we think that matters. And we've spent a lot of time in our team coming up with mind frames for teachers, mind frames for principals, mind frames for parents. And I'm very proud of that because it's a recent book that I completed with my son on mind frames for parents. Mind frames for students and mind frames for culture and climate. So that thinking. So let's go to the core of what underlies those mind frames. And it's this notion of how we think evaluatively. Now, I love the word evaluatively because it emphasizes value. What do we value? How do we make reasoning and critical thinking about what we value? It's not the data. It's not the test scores that matter. It's how you reason and critically think about them, how you interpret them that matters. And how are your teachers interpreting that so that they make the next best teaching decision? How do we make sure there's fidelity, there's quality in the implementation, and always checking for unintended consequences? Which students did I teach well, and which students didn't I teach well? What content did I teach well? What content did I not teach well? And what was the size of that effect? And we're humans. We have incredible biases. For example, I have a confirmation bias when I teach. I look for the good stuff. I look for those students who understand. When a student puts their hand up and answers a question correctly, I realize all the students got it. I actually should be doing the opposite, shouldn't I? I should be looking for when I didn't teach well, who I didn't teach well, who's not making progress, and attend to that. And that's going to be a true, balanced reflection of my teaching. And it's going to help me be more aware of where I need to go next with a student, with groups of students, and with a class. And it's that I'm going to come back to number 4, but that number 5, those teachers who are really good at evaluative thinking are able to stand in the shoes of others. They can stand in the shoes of other teachers. They can stand in the shoes of their students and see the world from their point of view. And this is why I'm not a great fan of teacher reflection, because it's so often the teacher reflecting of what they see in the mirror. I want you to go to the other side of the mirror and see yourself. And you can see the 5 evaluative thinking questions, which parallel very closely to what I showed you before in terms of student expectations. And then there are skills to do this. Collective efficacy is hard. We've been doing it now for 5 or 6 years. It's hard work. And a few years ago, I said to the team, maybe we should switch our attention and look at student collective efficacy. There was no such concept at the time, so we kind of invented it. Now, it was easier to do that work. It was safer to do that work. And it highlighted to us the I and the we skills. And the beauty of doing that, and you can see we published a book on it a couple of years ago, is we're now going to bring it back to the teachers. And if you look at the skills, these are the 3 core ones. Do you, teacher, have the skills to work in a group? Now, one of the most powerful skills is turn taking. Are you like me, who waits for someone to be quiet so I can talk myself? That's not very good turn taking. Can I genuinely listen when other people are talking? Does your staff room, does your professional learning have the same people talking all the time? Or is the genuine turn taking? Do you have the confidence to contribute to the group? Some of our really high impact teachers don't have that confidence. They come down to the staff room and they sit there and say, not about me. I'm okay. I just want to go back to my class and indulge in my passion. sorry, we need to hear your thinking too. We need to give you the confidence to contribute to the group. And the third, and the hardest, and it's certainly the hardest for me, is the confidence that the group can lead to a greater value than any one individual. I've been a dean at a university for 25 years, and I've sat in many meetings where I've thought, oh my goodness, I could do it quicker myself. I'm the problem. People realize that I don't have the confidence in the group. And so these, we would argue, are the critical skills. But unfortunately, there's more. The task. There's no point having collective efficacy when the task leads to a right and wrong answer. In that case, just get the brightest person in the group to do it. Its task has to have opportunities for multiple interpretations. And this is why in my background in universities as a measurement statistics person, I love it when we put data on the table and say, let's talk about interpretations, multiple interpretations. What do you think's going on here with the student? What do we need to find more about to the student to validate and triangulate? What do we need to do next in light of this evidence? And there's usually no great one right answer. So is the task conducive towards collective? And for students, far less so for staff, is the assessment realizing collective? Does it measure the individual's contribution and the collective contribution? Because students understand what you value by what you assess. But maybe also there needs to be two success criteria, one about my contribution, my confidence, and one about the groups. And you can see why this is not necessarily the easiest one, but it's really powerful. So how can we develop those evaluative skills and those collective skills to make the difference? And then there's that notion of impact, evaluation of impact. If I was with you, I'd spend some time asking you, what is your concept of impact? What's the nature of the impact that you want to have on your students? Now, I've done this with many, many teachers, and probably every teacher I've met talks about raising achievement and talks about many other things. Getting kids to want to come to school, turning them on to learning, motivating them. And I have a list about what I mean by impact, and I would be arguing that in any school, the leader should have this discussion. Because if one teacher thinks it's about one aspect and another teacher another aspect, they're doing totally different things to their students. I want a richness. For me, it is about achievement, and I make no excuses for including achievement in my impact. Schools wouldn't exist if achievement wasn't part of it. I also care about progress. I deeply care about teaching students strategies of learning. If a student is using a strategy of learning and comes up with a wrong answer, the last thing I want that student to do is to use the same strategy again, because they'll come up with the wrong answer again. And one of the reasons I call my work visible learning is not because learning's visible, it's not, it's in here. But how do we make it more visible so we can hear the student thinking? I care about teaching the students to have confidence to take on challenges. Some of our students are not very confident to take on challenges, particularly some of our brighter students. They want to be safe. They just want to learn more stuff and not necessarily go deeper. And yes, in this day and age, we do want them to respect self and respect others. Probably as critical, I want the school to be a safe place to learn. I want the school to be an inviting place to come and learn. I want to come into your school and ask your students, do you want to come to this class to learn the stuff the teachers are teaching you? Now, if you don't know what percentage of your students come to school to learn the stuff we're teaching them, you're not even on the starting point. In the Western world, at age 5, 95% of students want to come to school to learn the stuff we teach them. By the end of elementary, primary school, the start of high school, it dips to, at best, 4 out of 10 want to come to school to learn the stuff we teach them. And that's not good enough. And so this notion of impact and what we mean by impact, I would argue, needs to be debated and agreed upon. What measures you would use to indicate to you, not just measures, pencil and paper, but noticing artifacts of what's happening in the school to ensure that we are all, every teacher in every class is aiming for these different notions of impact. I want to illustrate particularly the achievement one. Start with the collective one. This is a graph of employment rates. Now, yes, it is in the United States of America, not in Pakistan. You're going to have to do some translation in Pakistan. But the point I'm making is employers now, not in the future, are now saying, if you have high content and high social skills, the employment rate's gone up. No surprise. If you have low content and low social skills, the employment rate's gone down. It doesn't, whether it's maths or science or panel beating, it's the same message. But look in the middle. Those students with lower content and higher social skills, it's gone up. And those with higher content and low social skills, it's gone down. What employers are asking for are for your graduates to be team players, to be translators, to be communicators. And if they don't have the content, they can teach that, particularly in this world that's getting more and more specialized. But if they don't have the teamwork, the collaboration, and the collective, it's too hard to teach. They don't want them. So if I came into your class, would I find the students sitting in groups, working alone? Would I see assessments all being done individually? Or would I see a mix of the collective and the individual? Because if I don't, you're not helping your students to be career or college ready. And when I look at achievement, now, we all want high achievement, don't we? I'm not so sure. Sometimes I think it gets in the way of good education and good learning, where we go on. Here in Australia, we've had a whole debate for the last 20 years. We want high standards. We want high achievement. Good schools are those with high achievement. Teachers want to go to good schools with high achievement. Parents have the option of choosing to go to good schools of high achievement. And it just bothers me that it's the wrong notion of impact. And when I talk about progress, I can get people very excited. Oh, yeah, we want progress. We want improvement. But I'm greedy. I want both. And so I draw this graph. And those students who start above average, who don't make a year's growth for a year's input, they're cruising. No one wants students who start below average and don't make a year's growth. But what's wrong with those students who start below average, but those teachers and schools, those students are making more than a year's growth? I think that should be highly esteemed. And of course, everyone wants students who start above average and make more than a year's growth optimal. Here's my point. They are not our best schools. High achieving schools are not necessarily our best schools. And they are distorting our rhetoric, they're distorting our system, they are privileging the wrong, and they're sending the wrong message to students and to teachers. Cruising schools are not defensible. They are our best schools. Right across Pakistan, right across Australia. Schools where students are making more than a year's growth. So school leaders, you have a major task to have a clear understanding what a year's growth looks like. And we spend a lot of time in our visible learning work helping schools understand what that year's growth looks like. And we can get every student in the school into the growth one. We can't guarantee that it'll go that way, but we sure can make sure they guarantee they go that way. Let me illustrate. Here's a graph of students on an achievement scale and on a progression scale. And I want you to look at Daniel and Tane. Now, on the achievement scale, they are the top 2 students in that class. No, they're not. I want to understand, teacher, what you did to Daniel that you're not doing to Tane, because there's a world of difference between Daniel and Tane, despite the fact they had the top 2 scores. Why is Daniel, Ella, and Lorna being so successful in that class, and Tane, Joshua, and Jaden are not, even though they were the brightest students. And look at Ryan and Connor. Ryan and Connor are near the bottom on achievement, but Ryan is an incredible learner. And by arithmetic, the more he goes that way, he must go up into that next block up there. What are you doing to the Ryan that you're not doing to Connor? And I want to go up to Ryan and say, Ryan, you are one of the most successful learners in this class. I have the evidence. And my point being is your understanding of impact. If it's high achievement, you're privileging the Tanes and the Daniels over the Connors and the Ryans. You're privileging Tane and Connor when they shouldn't be. You're telling the teachers Tane's doing a great job and Ryan's doing a terrible job. And not true, just not true. So understanding impact and what we mean by progress to achievement is pretty powerful. So collective efficacy about impact. I worry that collective efficacy will come, it'll be a hot topic, and it won't work. It's too hard. People will think just putting teachers in groups is collective efficacy. They think that putting teachers in groups is professional learning communities. That's just not the case. And that's why when you hear the word collective efficacy, it should be always collective efficacy about impact. And this is a very good example. So what's the role of school leaders? Well, as you can imagine, you have a pretty powerful role. The biggest power you have in any school is you can construct the narrative of what happens in that school. And I want it to be a narrative about impact. You have to build trust in the staff room, ensure that it's in the classroom, so that it's okay for teachers to bring problems of practice, problems of students to the staff room, so that we can have collective efficacy discussions about those students, about those problems. And it's safe. It's not a mark of failure when you bring success and you bring cases and you bring problems to the staff room. In the same way, it shouldn't be in the classroom. Your job is to evaluate the implementation of what you're doing, to maximize the impact, and to make sure everyone is involved, not just the select few, but as you saw in my graph, the Ryans, the Tanes, everybody needs to be involved. And like I showed you before with the literacy rates of the world, and the success in the school is a function of everybody, not individuals, not you, everybody. We all own the success. And that's one of the hardest parts of collective efficacy. How do we make sure everyone in the school has high expectations, realizes them, and are esteemed for it? Now, I could now look at this notion of collective efficacy about impact and say, well, 1.32, one of the highest impacts, what does it look like? Now, when you look down that list, surely you want every one of those. Surely that's the aim of why we go into schools, to have this kind of impact on students. And this is what the evidence is showing, that if you're prepared to invest in the collective of the school, getting thinking aloud, being critical, checking for biases, looking at how we go about our interpretations, making it safe for that critique, looking at our expectations, and in the classroom, you can get some stunning effects, such as on that list there. So my plea to you today in Beaconsfield is, how do we get a school? How do we get a group of schools? How do we get a nation having these ambitions, having high expectations for all our students, seeing our role as progress through to achievement, seeing our role as making schools inviting places for students to come to, esteeming and recognizing the excellence that we have in our school systems, realizing that our issue is that the variation is within a school as much as it is between a school across Pakistan. Not every teacher is high on impact in every classroom, but every teacher who is high on impacts needs to share that thinking, not just the best practice, but that thinking about how they make decisions, how they make value judgments, how they make interpretations, and spread that like a virus through the school and the system. And that is what I mean by building teachers' collective efficacy. Thank you.
We will see you at the next section, and thank you very much for being here today. Thank you.